Wouldn't it be nice if Adam Sandler didn't count the dates up all so wrong? And wouldn't it be nice to talk together in a format that goes way too long? You know it's time to rewind, baby, for 19 dates of this movie with Drew Barry. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Good morning, listeners. It's another beautiful day here on It's Time to Rewind. I'm your host, Bubbawheat. Joining me today is my guest, Chandra Boudreau. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to have you back again after taking a few weeks off.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this season we are discussing, what was the movie again?
50 First Dates.
Oh, right. And, well, actually, it's 19 first dates, and we are going through them one date at a time. And this week's date is what I'm calling their 11th date, because it's their 11th interaction, and I think at this point we are up to their 5th actual date. And it starts at 47 minutes and 16 seconds with Lucy reading Still Life with Woodpecker at the HukiLau cafe, and it ends at 57 minutes and 6 seconds with Henry thinking about another way to deal with Lucy's memory issue every day rather than lying to her. And so this is another attempt at, he's, at this point in the movie, he has somewhat made up with Marlon and Doug, and is able to come back to the HukiLau cafe instead of meeting her on the side of the road again.
Yeah, a little better.
Yeah. And, I kind of like this because this feels like a progression from an early date whenever she was speaking Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of calling her out on it, he just, gave up and said, oh, apparently she speaks Chinese and doesn't want to talk to me. But at this point in the relationship, I feel like he has enough confidence that he's on the right track, that he is going to call her out on her BS.
Yeah. It's a back and forth kind of thing. Like, he's not respecting her saying no and her having to make up the excuse of, oh, I have a boyfriend, which is like a general problem for women trying to eat on their own and like not respecting boundaries. But also he knows, like, it's this weird, like, it's kind of okay because they do know each other, but she doesn't. It's a little messy, but it's not like uncomfortably messy.
Yeah, this feels like it falls into line with the playful banter that we've seen them in the earlier dates whenever they do get along.
Yeah. And for her for her to say Ringo like McCartney is not, it's past the point of believability that she's like, okay, yeah, I just kind of did myself in there a little. Mm-hmm. But for her to have to say that is kind of where it's like, don't love that part of it. Like, he's pushing her past that point if she is not into it today. But
yeah, and I think
he's there.
I do like the fact that she does go with, if you had to choose, like, if you were going with one of the Beatles' first names, don't choose Ringo. I mean, John, Paul, George, those are all believable names, but Ringo is the only one that is much less believable as an actual person's name unless their last name is Starr.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that she does mention, two of the Beatles, Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney, as the name of her fake boyfriend. And those are, we talked a bit about the soundtrack the last time you were on, and those are two of the Beatles whose songs were used in the film. Did you catch that?
I did not think about it at the time, but that is totally, that's wild. They were not the only George was still alive at this point, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. Though. Yeah, George would have still been alive, but he did not contribute to the soundtrack as far as I could tell. But Paul and Linda do the song Another Day, which I believe that's used earlier in the movie.
Mhm.
And Ringo does a song with Leon Redbone performing the song My Little Grass Shack in uh, Kealakekua, Hawaii.
Huh.
Uh,
Neither of
which,
those make appearances on the soundtrack, the CD soundtrack. So just so in
right.
case you were wondering at home for the CD that I physically have on my desk.
Yeah, but I do remember talking about the Paul McCartney song early in the movie, but I have not gotten to the Ringo song just yet. So I think that either appears later on in the movie, unless it appears in one of the last three scenes. Because for the listeners, we are recording this right after Condra's last episode, so I have not done my notes for the previous I think 3 episodes
Yeah.
that you will have already heard, but I have not prepared for yet.
The magic of scheduling and actually producing a podcast is way more complicated.
Yes, exactly.
But I
And
do get a kick out of like he's approaching by offering to make a syrup jacuzzi.
yeah, I do love that, and that I think that ties in especially nicely with one of her first waffle creations, where I believe she actually used coffee to make the steam to come out of the smokestack.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
did you? I know it's not really prominently featured in this minutes, but did you kind of take a look at her waffle creation in this scene?
It's pyramidal if I could understand it, or it's more triangular than some of her other construction projects.
Yeah,
The variation.
it has like kind of the standard square base, so, the four sides, which look like they were made by about half a waffle on each side, and then she's made like waffle sticks to make kind of a teepee top or a teepee roof.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if the workers at the diner ever notice, like, oh, she's in this kind of mood if she's doing X and building this kind of house, like if there's any sort of pattern to her construction projects, which would be an amusing thing for those people to observe.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I can't tell if there's like something sitting on top of the waffle creation, or if it's just an artifact or like a graphical artifact on the DVD copy that I'm watching this, because it looks like there's almost something green right at the very top of the roof, but it's possible that that's just a digital artifact.
Definitely could be.
Yeah. But we don't really find out how well this jibing goes back and forth, because they get interrupted with Lucy getting a ticket on her car.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I do like about this is like I feel like this entire scene is a real turning point in the relationship with
Absolutely.
really everybody involved, because it like even in the beginning, Henry is like not sure if he should follow her, and Sue's the one that's like prompts him, and she's like, go help her. And so that real simple gesture from Sue shows us as an audience that Sue is behind this relationship. Like Sue is on Henry has won over Sue at this point.
Yeah, it's really that little encouragement there kind of indicates how the rest of the scene is gonna go.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I didn't really pay attention to, I don't not sure if I noticed, but uh, and I think it might just be the guyness of myself showing. But did you notice that Lucy wears the exact same outfit every time she goes to the HukiLau cafe? She's always wearing
Yeah.
the pink shirt and the white pants.
Yep. Which is weird. And honestly, like this whole kind of her realization and the sticker all made me question, like, does she have, like, was this her Sunday outfit? As part of her Sunday routine, she's like, on Sunday, I wear my cute pink shirt, and like, if it rains, whatever. But like, I'm thinking of Lucy in similar ways to like folks dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, like trying to talk them, like if they don't remember the last time they showered, like how do you encourage them to go bathe or whatever, like those kind of simple processes that folks with conventional memory gaining abilities experience, like how does she go about that? And it is very weird. It almost feels like a cartoon a little, that she wears the same thing every day. Like it's when you like look into a cartoon character's closet and it's just the same thing on every hanger.
Yeah, I love I love those jokes.
Like, do they have to do laundry every night?
Well, yeah, that's actually what really clued me in on this rewatch, that made me pay attention, because on whenever we get to see the first time of Marlon and Doug doing their daily routine,
Reset.
they show her washing her outfit.
Oh my gosh. I just remembered that scene existed. Sorry. It just like all hit me just all of a sudden. I was like, oh yeah, they reset every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think before I really paid attention to that part of that scene, I just kind of glossed over the fact that she was wearing the same thing, because I feel like it's partly my guyness, and also growing up with a lot of cartoons, like you said. I'm used to cartoon characters wearing the exact same outfit every single episode.
Yeah, and also there's a tricky thing with just doing it in this format where you break it down, that you're like, what were they wearing 2 weeks ago? Do I remember this?
It makes the script supervisor, it makes things a bit easier for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we get this moment of her breaking down and realizing, like, it's looking at the newspaper, and it really shows you how dialed into this routine. And I did talk about it on, I believe, on that whole daily routine episode, how Marlon and Doug have this routine very set to make it so that she interacts with as few people as possible. So, like, she just goes to the HukiLau cafe for breakfast, where Sue and Nick are fully on board and they watch out for her. And then she comes straight home, and then they have the entire rest of the day planned out for her, to where she doesn't have to interact with anybody else for the entire day.
Yeah.
And so that really minimizes the amount of interactions that she has that could confuse her and make her realize that she's not that this isn't October anymore.
Mm-hmm. Which I think Henry's efforts in this entire scene, which is probably where we're gonna like wind up going to, I like that he reaffirms her feelings the entire time, where Marlon and Doug sometimes are like, we've already done this before. Like, he's like, yeah, it's okay that you're feeling these things, and like, we can go do this. And there's this constant stream of affirmations, even though for him it's his first time experiencing one of these bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And Marlon and Doug are kind of tired of them, it seems, a little, but they still care for her enough to reinforce what her expectations are. So it's this weird balance of like burnout and care and newness of it all, that it makes for an interesting observation as an audience member, because you're like, okay, none of them are really in the wrong here, but there's a lot of different angles could be observed from.
Right. And I also really like the filmmaking choices. I feel like it's really economical, the way, like, the scene, the part of the scene, like, where she comes home and she's honking the car, and Marlon just says, "Having a bad day, Doug." And just the way he says that, just that one single line, really tells you everything that you need to know. That they know exactly what's happening. Like, they might not know exactly what's happening, but they know that the illusion was shattered, and so they have a routine to deal with the having a bad day moment.
Yeah. For better or worse. And I like that Henry starts questioning, is this the best way to handle a bad day? Which includes showing her a book, like a scrapbook, and further breaking the illusion by showing her a stack of newspapers of the day.
Yeah.
And then showing her a scrapbook that has a pretty terrifying image of herself, and then her to be drawn to feeling her head. Like, that is why would you wish that on anyone?
Yeah, it's really focusing on the line and the trauma of the event.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the movie does a good job of showcasing that while not demonizing it either. Like it's showing you that this is not the correct way, but they're not bad people for doing it this way. And I also like how we don't hear Marlon explaining. We just, because the sound drops out at the moment whenever he's showing her the stack of papers. And then the sound is still low up until she, Lucy runs out to the end of the dock, and then it comes back in whenever she has this, this scream into the air. And then we get like the scrap that you talked about, and the newspaper clipping of stray cow causes accidents, and the image of her in the hospital bed, and then they have the decision to go to the hospital, the memory center. And I already mentioned it, but I feel like this moment is another scene where we get where they kind of show the turning points of the relationship. Because I believe, last week we did kind of feel like Marlon and Doug were on Henry's side, but this week is whenever he openly admits, he's kind of your boyfriend.
Yeah. They recognize his compassion and acknowledge that he's actually a good presence in her life.
Even though they've, at this point, by my count, they've only had 5 actual dates. Unless, well, let me ask you, do you think that at this point of the movie, there are days that Henry interacts with Lucy that we don't see on screen, or do you think we're shown every single interaction between Henry and Lucy?
I would assume there's a small time jump somewhere in between. It may not be weeks, plural, but it could be a little bit of time. Like, his comfort of walking up to her at the table there, thinking that versus the last kind of scene, which is a pretty, if I'm remembering correctly, that's a pretty intense one, because that is the fight. No, the fight's a couple before. But
yeah, well, last week they technically don't actually interact at all.
So I would imagine there's some sort of time jump between the fight and then having a lack of interaction and this kind of very comfortable conversation that starts this date before it escalates, because I think some simmering down needed to happen too, and maybe his presence just worked on Sue to the point where she would advocate for him to follow her.
Yeah, I guess that does make sense, because if this was 100% what we see on screen, then the last time that Sue saw Henry would have been whenever he upsets Lucy by not asking her out, and that's whenever he has the interaction with Doug and Marlon where they tell him not to go to the HukiLau anymore. But there could also be, because we do know that Marlon and Sue do have conversations outside of the movie, because they have this rapport with each other where anytime Lucy does have a bad day, Sue gives Marlon a heads up.
So I think there's probably a small time jump that helped progress Henry's assuredness, but not so much that it's like, oh, they've been doing this for months and calling him a sort of boyfriend isn't out of line.
Yeah, I agree with that. I could see maybe it jumped a couple weeks ahead, and then this car ride catch up. I think this is a fun little scene but in a way, it almost feels too. I mean, I think invasive is a little bit too strong of a word, but this, you know, this whole thing gets prompted whenever Henry calls her loose, and then that's when Marlon says, you know, that he's kind of your boyfriend, and then we get this like catch up. You know, we find out that somebody else has taken over her class, somebody that she knows that was engaged at the time, or you know, had a person of interest, got married. And Doug got disqualified from his bodybuilding competition because of the urine test, which is, you know, the comedy bit of the three. It's like you get you get like the basic knowledge, like the basic callback, because we do know that she was a teacher and she's talks about going to her class on Monday. And then we get this other bit of information that it's just completely random. It doesn't really get mentioned before or after this scene. And then the funny bit of, you know, the running joke of Doug and his steroid use and his bodybuilding. Like, what's your thoughts on Doug and this whole, like, Doug is a complete character, I guess.
I think so. For me, the Doug stuff always kind of irritated me. I always was like, why is this here? Like, I remember as a kid, I'd be like, okay, this, and then the Rob Schneider stuff, I'd be like, okay, I don't care about any of this. Like, as a kid, I was just like, all right, let's move on. Like, let's get past this. I think for me, part of the reflection now is it's such an interesting way to use Sean Astin.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, but then also The Goonies is an absolute treasure in my eye. And it's a very interesting thing for Sean Astin to be a presence in. And I didn't think it added anything to this story other than like maybe, okay, this is why he's like sometimes aggressive in ways that seems excessive, or he's doing this for some particular reason beyond what's shown. Like, Doug doesn't quite feel well-rounded enough to be like, yes, this running gag of him being on steroids makes sense. But at the same time, it is a personality trait. It gives some comedic moments, and I actually like that there's a random question about a friend of hers because it just reveals her general compassion. Like, her first concern is her students, which is like totally a teacher thing to do. But then it's like, I had other people in my life before this. What has happened to all of them? Like, I assume I don't see any of them anymore. And it like really reveals the extent of the loss that she's feeling in this moment. So not only is she like experiencing the distrust to her family and this confusion, but she's also like, what have I lost in this process? So,
yeah, it's been a couple months since I've watched the whole movie at this point in recording, but I do know that she does have the moments, you know, shortly after this where she does get this big catch up with her friends, and you do get that sense of that she hasn't seen these friends in a long time, that they are catching up with her, and it's not just, you know, catching up with her because she forgot and she saw them, you know, 2 weeks ago. It's because they have been actively prevented from seeing her because of this condition.
Which, again, speaks to, like, Marlon and Doug doing it from a good place in their heart where they can handle, but maybe is not the best for her. And this whole, and them going to the institute and talking with the doctor starts like unraveling, like, okay, maybe this is like it starts to, for the audience, unravel this. Maybe this isn't the best way to do this, and maybe there is another way. And as Henry's starting to figure out, the audience is also starting to unravel a little.
And jumping back to Doug a little bit, I meant to say this whenever you brought it up, but I pretty much 100% agree with you that if Doug was just about anybody else other than Sean Astin, I would not like him. But because it's Sean Astin, I love Doug. But I do think that this scene in general and the running gag of the wet dreams, I think, does wear a little thin.
Mm-hmm. And I think that gets to where, like, it's a premonition of where Adam Sandler movies are going.
Mm.
It's like, oh, we turn into grown-ups at some point. And this is like the early preview of that.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of a callback that, or not necessarily a callback, but I have mentioned early on that Doug as a character does feel like a little bit of this man child and this like stunted growth, like he's kind of stuck in puberty, and I think that him still having wet dreams, even though he claims that it's not him claiming, but the theory is presented it's because of his steroid use, which I did do like just a minimal amount of Google searching to see if that actually was a side effect of steroid, and I did find a couple like Reddit threads, but I didn't really find anything conclusive that where it is an actual side effect of steroid use. I think it's just made up for the movie for the most part.
Yeah.
And then the other big conversation in this moment is the whole mention of sex and them having sex, and this is like I'm 50-50 on this moment because it does show like this it like really toes the line between serious and a joke, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like what do you think about this whole moment? Like him saying like, no, we don't have sex, but I really want to.
Yeah, it lands. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely an Adam Sandler joke. Like his just delivery there is like, yep, that's Adam Sandler. I think what it more plays on for me is Lucy's in betweenness of being an adult and having a life, but also having a lot of control, like being controlled by her father, or her father caring for her in the only way he understands by limiting her. So it's a joke in that, like, oh, we're adults and we can do these things, but also the concern has, like, Marlon feels is like she's getting away from me. So there's like this other like emotional wrench in it that I'm just like, don't know how I feel about that. But I think it's I feel like I'm like, yeah, that's a classic Adam Sandler delivery, and like it doesn't necessarily take away anything from the moment, but I don't think it necessarily like adds anything. I
Right.
think it doesn't necessarily land better or worse than the steroid conversation, but it's not like, wow, we really needed this line to like clinch where we are in understanding their relationship, other than Henry is demonstrating restraint by respecting that she's having processing issues, which
Yeah, and I was just kind of going back and forth in this moment, and I think that Drew Barrymore does a really good job in this car ride scene of expressing just this confusion and like helplessness and just this struggle with what she's dealing with. I think she plays that really well in this scene.
oh yeah. Yeah, I think Drew Barrymore's acting throughout this entire date is just very well done in a very compassionate and understanding sort of way to people that actually face this kind of thing.
Mm. And then we make it to the Callahan Institute, which did you know what Callahan Institute is a reference to?
I don't.
It actually ties this movie into the Tommy Boy cinematic universe, because the Tommy Boy's father, that Chris Farley movie, because his father in that movie was T.B. Callahan out of Sandusky, Ohio, and
Oh.
and Dan Aykroyd's doctor mentions that that's who funds this institute, and in that movie, Dan Aykroyd also played a rival CEO of a company that was trying to buy Callahan's company.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah.
That classic SNL, let's toss some references in,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice. this whole, like, Dan Aykroyd being the Doctor works really well and is also just very weird at the same time, because there are some jokes and things that it's like, that is so unrealistic, and, like, the naming of 10-second Tom just, like, gets me. But he also shows such kindness and compassion, and, like, clearly has rapport with Doug and is so well suited to the job. Like, the Doctor is believable as someone who works with people who struggle so much.
Yeah, he definitely pulls elements of like his performance in My Girl. He was the dad in My Girl, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've thought about that movie. But yes, I do think he is.
Yeah, me too. Like, it's been so long that I had to question whether or not he was actually the father in that movie. But we also get this brief gag with the stupid receptionist, and this is another gag that I'm kind of 50-50 on. I think some days I laugh at him, and some days I'm like, oh, that's just a little too much.
Yeah, I definitely today leaned more on the little too much.
And then we get this description of Goldfield syndrome, which the name of that and how he describes it is of course completely fictitious. I mean, short-term memory loss is a real thing, but it is very much not as it is presented in this movie at all, because it's much closely resembles how it's presented in the movie Memento, which I covered right before this.
Oh, nice. So you can be like, well, this is wrong.
And like I do also like, I think it's funny that that Doug is prompted to wear a shirt, and whenever he does, he pulls on this. This is the least amount of shirt he could possibly wear while still considered to be wearing a shirt.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate the call out of, like, put on a real shirt. Like, stop being whatever this is and just, like, try and pull yourself up a little bit. Like, you have the ability, just go for it.
And let's see, then we get to meet 10-second Tom.
Yeah.
This is another kind of hit or miss character, because this feels like something taken completely to the extreme, and again, it's a callback to the whole wet dream joke, and that the fact that gets a laugh out of, like, literally everyone in earshot. I think that kind of calls a little bit too much attention to it.
I think where the moment breaks for me is that Dr. Keats calls him 10-second Tom. Like, if he was like, oh, let me introduce you to Tom. Like, it's not great that he's comparing her case to someone else's in the first place, but then you throw in, like, here's a demeaning name that people use, and, like, at least he doesn't use it to his face, but I shouldn't have to say at least he doesn't do that.
I mean, but he practically does. He is kind of talking about him to his face, and then whenever he's called out on it, he's like, don't worry, you'll forget about it in about 3 seconds.
Yeah. So I remember always sitting uncomfortably with this character. I'm like, the actor is very funny, but it's a very weird scene. But it is kind of nice that Henry still respects Tom and, like, shares a joke with him and, like, demonstrate to Lucy that, like, even Tom is no less of a person worthy of time and care than Doug, who has normal memory processing. That, like, I think Henry demonstrates himself very well in this interaction, even if it's, like, a silly joke kind of thing and it's, like, not funny, but it's still a good demonstration of Henry as a person.
Yeah, it's still Henry treating Tom as a person and not a prop, which is practically how his own doctor is treating him.
Yeah.
And then after this, we leave the Memory Institute. Lucy goes to sleep, and then we have a bit of a bonding moment between Marlon, Doug, and Henry. And this is another important relationship milestone, because we did kind of get the turning point early on whenever Marlon calls him her boyfriend. He's basically her boyfriend, but this scene really seals the deal and shows the audience that Marlon and Doug are 100% on board with this relationship moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I skipped over another very important point of this movie. And before Lucy goes to bed, she basically, she tells Henry to mention lilies because she likes lilies and hopefully he won't strike out tomorrow. But the bigger aspect of her saying that is she is basically giving her consent to the relationship at this point. And I think that's very important for this movie, and it really shows the audience that Lucy is on board with this, and it's another moment really enforcing the fact that this is potentially a healthy relationship between two people and not some creepy stalker that's preying on someone with memory issues.
Yeah, I don't love the phrasing, I'm a sucker for lilies. I think that's the most generic thing to say. Like, I was like, really? Just the concept of lilies? Like, is he going to have to go learn how to grow lilies? Is it the scent? Is it the sight? Like, I'm like, lilies is just the most generic thing to say. But also, I do really appreciate that she's like, I've had this day. You've been an incredible support. Like, thank you for being there. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I really did appreciate that as well. And I was like, oh no, we're not going to talk about the weird lilies line. But then because that was in my notes. I was like, this is a silly idea.
So how about them lilies?
Yeah. But I do like to get back to the doc and their conversation about Henry gently questioning their methods.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is the part where Henry becomes the audience, and he points out that Lucy isn't just getting upset over her memory loss. She's being upset over being fooled by her loved ones day after day for the better part of the year, which is probably exactly what a lot of the audience is thinking at this point in the movie.
Mm-hmm. It's something that just like also Henry could point out and be like, why didn't you get her new stickers? Like, she's not necessarily like stickers on a car. I feel like you don't really notice unless you have to, kind of thing. Like, that feels like an irresponsible thing on Marlon's part. Just like to start all of this off. He's like, he's so careful, but then he messes that up so big. But
yeah, you would think that they would get the reminder mailed to the house, and he would see that mail, that he would be in charge of the finances. I mean, you could argue that maybe they are a little bit financially strapped, because I imagine that Marlon and Doug aren't able to go fishing. That's because they do make their living off of by being fishermen, and you get the impression that they haven't been able to go out to sea since Lucy had their accident. I mean, they don't really bring up financial hardship as a plot point in the movie, but that could be something like deep into the background.
Definitely. Yeah, and her going to breakfast every single day. But I do like that Marlon tells Doug off. He's like, no, maybe this is something worth considering, and like, Henry deserves a seat at this table now. Like, he's shown that he actually wants to fight in this.
Mm-hmm. And then this day ends where we see Henry basically stealing that binder that we saw earlier, and we will see him use it for the video that we will talk about more next week, and that will be a part of the movie up through the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the movie the movie is such a great idea, and I'm bummed I don't get to talk about it, but I also just will throw my 2 cents in there that I like that you see that Henry is being very thoughtful about this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this does come to the end of the minute, and it comes to the end of your time here on this podcast for this season. And, if you did want to talk about the video or anything else about the movie that wasn't covered in the three scenes that you were a part of, here's your chance if you want to talk about anything else.
Well, I think because I made reference to it in my first minute or first scene in this, the Forgetful Lucy song is just so reminiscent of I Want to Grow Old with You from Wedding Singer, in that it's like silly and sweet and it's very Adam Sandler. So I've appreciated that song for a while, even though it's got some really bad like rhyming schemes and it's a little questionable and it's a lot less sweet than Grow Old with You. But I do think this movie came up with a clever, kind way of working with Lucy in normalizing her day to day. In the video, I thought that was I remember the first few times I'm like, oh, that was really sweet, and getting to see all those little moments, because especially I'm sure like when she was pregnant and when like her marriage and stuff like that would have been so scary and out of body that I think just like
yeah, my first guest my first guest, Jake Lewitt, he was disappointed that he wasn't able to join me for the last episode to talk about the horrors of going through pregnancy with this condition and waking up and seeing just a giant belly and not knowing and not understanding that you were pregnant until you watched this video, and just what a complete horror show that would be.
Oh my God. Like, yeah, that was always something like on my brain that I was like, that's terrifying. I could not imagine, but.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me for these three episodes, these three non-sequential episodes. It's been a real joy to talk with you and get your insights on these scenes, and they've I am a little bit surprised because I'm not the biggest Adam Sandler fan, and I do think that in general this movie is kind of middle of the road, but I do feel like I appreciate this movie a lot more, and I respect this movie a lot more than I thought I would, even whenever I do see some problematic elements here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for inviting me. No, it was such a treat to get asked, and yeah, that New Hampshire. I'll, as much as I question Adam Sandler nowadays, I will still talk about him because of the New Hampshire. There was an Applebee's I just went to a bunch as a kid that was just covered in Adam Sandler memorabilia. He's a thing around here.
Interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I was not aware that he was from New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Him and Seth from SNL as well. They're the two big New Hampshire comedians. So, sorry, Seth's last name has absolutely left my brain right now, which is fun.
Seth Meyer?
Yes, thank you. I was like, it's just not, my brain is not running at this point.
Yeah, I was like,
so Seth Meyer.
Yeah, in my head I was like, Seth Rogen? No, I don't think that's who she's talking about. Seth MacFarlane? No, I don't think that's right either.
Yeah.
SNL? Oh, Seth Meyer. Yes, that's got to be who it is.
Yeah, so Seth Meyers and Adam Sandler being the two like big modern comedians from New Hampshire, there's a lot of state pride in them.
Nice. Well, for one last time, why don't you go ahead and let everybody else know where else you can be found online?
Sure. If you want to explore another slightly romantic comedy film in the High School Musical movies, you can find my brother and I's podcast, Wildcat Minute, on the podcatcher of your choosing by looking up Wildcat Minute or Amateur Nerds to find our back seasons. We're also on Instagram and Tumblr. Again, look up Wildcat Minute or Amateur Nerds and you should find us no problem.
And as always, you can find me. I am Bubbawheat on pretty much all the social medias out there. You can find this podcast, It's Time to Rewind, on all the available podcatchers. And we also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. And you can join that and discuss episodes as they come out. as well as have discussions about time loop movies or TV shows or anything time loop related is welcome there. Or even, since we're covering Adam Sandler, any other Adam Sandler movies, that discussion is also welcome. And until next time, I will see you for breakfast again next week.
You're making up a boyfriend so you can get rid of me?
No, I'm not.
What's his name then?
Ringo?
Is his last name Starr?
No, McCartney.
McCartney, okay.